Battleships unloaded their ammunition with no regard for spending, like there is no tomorrow, which was reasonable as there might not be. They overpowered aquatic beasts under the influence of darkness, ate those bullets like breakfast. Some got them positioned to hijack some ships, and the transcendent soldiers moved to defend. The sea has devolved into a bloody battlefield of projectiles and savage clashes. Unfortunately for the humans, there was a seemingly endless supply of sea beasts emerging batch after batch. Going by sheer numbers of experts versus beasts, the humans were at a massive disadvantage. The ship full of knights was struggling in such a disadvantageous position. Ship captains were slowly losing hope as they could see the emergence of colossal sea beasts on the right side of the field. All they could do was spray and pray that the ammo they were using was powerful enough for a deterrent. But all the spraying and praying were useless against tough scales, and a killer pink beam blasting through the engine room. The ship's left side was toast. Water was flooding into the hull, slowly sinking the ship. To make matters worse, they ran out of ammunition. One saving grace was switching to a backup power source, which was still feasible to use for the propulsion system. The captain was a brave man. Even if they have to die on the sea, he won't let a single beast off easily. Without bullets, he would gladly use the ship itself as a blunt weapon to ram into a row of beasts. It was a suicide mission, but it seemed to work, at least. The explosion deleted quite a few enemies. Yulil, the master of magnetism, watched from afar as the Hua Xia side showed their bravery. In front of him were monsters of all shapes and sizes, including the dark urchins. The non-stop appearance of new monsters was not just troublesome anymore. It might be their downfall. He knew that the ammunition they had been using to keep most beasts from advancing would run dry. What would follow would most likely be complete defeat. Some unlucky chaps were assigned to the spot where hungry shark beasts emerged, and you already know how that would go. Spatial magic prodigy Yu Ziyu and the priestess worked hand in hand, trying to minimize damage. But they also knew that the rate they were going to would not be sustainable if it continued. Yu Ziyu was so worried about the wave in front of her that she did not notice a maw coming from the side. She would have been a quick snack if it wasn't for the arrival of the new players in town. The prodigy was mortified. Had she not been saved on time, she would have surely perished without even knowing how. Her savior was none other than the five-headed giant snake who had turned gigantic after its training arc under the ocean. If the snake was in here, of course, the orca would follow. They had successfully rallied a few independent sea tribes to provide some much-needed backup. Yula freaked out at the sight of these new grotesque faces behind the fleet, but the orca spoke out in human tongue, insisting that he deal with the sea beasts in front and not to worry about the rear. Those that had keener senses, like the bishop, felt the spiritual breath of the mutant tree on the surprised guests. Then came a strike strong enough to make a deep-sea king falter and shatter the shell. A decisive voice urged the humans to not give up as the final moments were yet to come. Golden Jesus looked to his side and was surprised to see an unexpected face. It was Seth of the Western Wasteland, the previous rank 4 among the mainland's 10 great beasts, venerated as a god. This time, Seth's not the only one who came to assist the god tree. There are also the glacier beasts of the north walking on water. One swipe with a vicious roar froze the ocean over, making spiky walls of ice around the ships. These ice structures should be beneficial as footholds for humans. This is just the Marineford War in one piece at this point. But here, they have transcendent Johnny Sins, who's a little confused as to what's happening, but would gladly ride or die with his benefactor's cause. A fiery meteor struck down a fanged beast. Not only was it scorching hot, but the velocity alone made it a lethal attack. The only one who could manipulate fire to this level is the woman they call the Flame Empress, Shi Yaoqing. Behind her was an aggregation of genetic freaks enhanced by beastly traits who were hungry for slaughter, feared by many. The Dark Assembly had entered the fray. With their bare bodies that rivaled a beast's, the genetic hybrids engaged. On the mainland, the backup was also starting to arrive. Shenggong looked up to the skies and saw a freaking phoenix blocking out the light with its massive body. The power of this legendary beast has over flames cannot be understated. It basically fried a whole fleet of Australian monsters without a fuss. Any sort of help would be much appreciated, so this was great news. Darkness has been paying attention to the minor skirmishes outside of the main duel, and his belief that the creatures on this planet are fools has been strengthened. Even though they can't change anything with the disparity in power, they just never give up. But that's where his logic was flawed. God Tree knew from experience that a cornered creature would fight and claw its way to survival. They have yet to acknowledge this war as a lost cause. Darkness does not like getting his ideals questioned, so he just wants to kill God Tree and slaughter the rest of the army to prove that he's right. But that might have just become a little more difficult now that another surprise guest has arrived. God Tree got the vibe that these new arrivals are not hostile against him. This was only natural, as it was the entirety of the celestial tribe that had just touched down to do their job. Evolved Australites wreak havoc using their nasty beams of concentrated energy, while Little Panda expertly maneuvers around the destructive attack. He should be fine when dealing with one, but evolved Australites have swarmed the mainland at all angles. Just as he was about to fall victim to one, something happened. His big brother finally reached the front lines and saved his little bro, dislocating an Australith's jaw. He yelled at the little one to take this battle more seriously if he wanted to survive. With the monster's fall, hundreds of smaller Australian beasts were crushed to death. Little Panda was not expecting to see his big bad brother in here. Big Panda's sights and nose were directed to the breaths of the mutant tree and darkness up ahead. So, he decided to kill his way into the Earth Dome. Back inside the main ring, the light of the Celestial Tribe's entry shone brightly. Darkness took one look at them and felt that they were awfully familiar. He reckons that they must be the future generation of those bastards that sealed him. He could finally settle his worth of grievances once and for all. Already acquainted with the God Tree, White Elephant expressed their intention to help. The Celestial Dragon narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect Darkness to use the Spirit Tide to break free. He would have stayed sealed if the Celestial Tribe had not declined in strength throughout every passing generation. They angrily retorted that Darkness should have just remained in the deep sea. He just laughed at their pitiful remarks, for they are the ones who should return where they came from. So, he'll add these bunch to the corpses he'll bury after the war. Spending 50,000 evolution points, Darkness busted out of the terrifying grasp of the dragon catcher. He tried to swipe the field, smashing through the enemies, but was blocked by God Tree's posture. Left open after a blocked attack, the celestial beings took their shot. White Elephant took to the air for a sky-piercing hoof. The celestial aquatic dragon created a shimmering pool of water torrent, while the last of the three conjured a barrage of whirling cannons. Darkness responded by spending 50,000 points to create a light shield. That coordinated celestial attack could not even pierce through. He laughed and taunted them to stop scratching and start attacking properly instead. That taunt might have backfired, as God Tree was about to drop the Call of Light. Possessing a superior affinity with the light element, he dropped a Pillar of Brilliance. This one made Darkness buckle as he hurriedly purchased the reverse skill. That's when the Big Panda seized the perfect opportunity to disrupt the battle. His claws manifested a green apparition, made of energy to clobber Darkness. If there's one he can't forgive, it would be the genocidal Darkness. But the incarnation of evil just scoffed at that sentiment. For a minute, God Tree was alarmed as he sensed a breath similar to that of Little Panda entering this death zone. But Big Panda is more than capable of defending himself, and he came here to kill Darkness no matter what it takes. After suffering from multiple ranged attacks, the incarnation of evil was very susceptible against melee combat. The celestial beasts immediately provided cover fire from a distance to make Darkness suffer even more. Then, another familiar figure entered the fray seamlessly, the Flame Empress. Her blazing blade cut through the flesh of Darkness like a hot knife slicing through butter. God Tree tried to yell at Shi Yao Qing to watch out as the monster had gotten infuriated with all the unwelcome interruptions. Flame Empress would have been caught by the tentacles of Darkness if the celestial dragon had not acted fast enough. With half his body immobile, Darkness was forced to eat another sky-piercing hoof to the face. The initial contact shattered his face, and the full impact was just pure destruction. With Darkness being a stationary target, the aquatic dragon shot another water dragon. This sequence of ruthless attacks virtually deleted the seemingly invincible body, riddling it with holes. Big Panda focused all of his strength on one fist attack, with the intent to send the final boss to hell. It was a powerful punch that would not pale in comparison compared to the Celestials. But he also had the tenacity and aggression to keep going further. He was going so hard that he failed to see that the enemy's body had entirely disintegrated. Darkness shed his fake body to reveal a devilish beast that came straight out of a nightmare. With the form change came a different arsenal of attacks. Darkness unleashed beams of power, homing in on the pesky pests. As always, God Tree had to bail his allies out of danger as he put up another earth elemental wall. The beams quickly shattered the walls, causing sudden explosions. The dust settled, and Darkness saw the celestial beings pooling their power together to return him to the place where he belonged.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
With the three swirling together, a spirit ball of compressed power threatened darkness. His many eyes turned bloodshot with anger. These bastards were trying to seal him again. White Elephant did not deny their mission. Everything has been set for this moment. Sealing darkness is the sole reason for the celestial tribe's existence, after all. The spirit ball reached the disemboweled body of darkness, trapping it inside. The sphere then started getting sucked by a sealing portal. With the extraordinary suction of the sealing technique, darkness would be hard-pressed to get out of this one. While the portal caves in to pull him inside, he curses at the bastards trying to imprison him again. How can he let these lowly creatures succeed again? Fueled by anger and rebellion, he used the claws of darkness to shred through the sphere, freeing himself. He did that by extending the claws, stabbing the white elephant before everybody's eyes. The surprised beast coughed up blood as his life flashed before his eyes. The following targets were the dragon duo, and they did not stand a chance at all. If Big Panda and the Flame Empress had not intervened, they would have suffered the same fate as White Elephant. The Empress knew that they could not afford to let darkness interrupt their best shot of sealing the evil incarnate. Injuring the elephant was enough to shatter the sphere a little. So, the celestial elephant blamed himself for almost ruining the seal. At this rate, darkness could escape given time. Just when they needed it, attacks made of dirt hit darkness in various spots to push him further inside the portal. With earth element manipulation, God Tree intended to make the final boss scram back to where it belongs. Darkness kept on struggling, but it looked a lot like a losing battle at this point. The coalition of some of the most powerful creatures on the planet had somehow set aside their differences to make this happen. After an extended period of struggle, the presence of darkness slowly dissolves into infinite nothingness. The next thing you know, the hole in space had already closed tightly. The coalition did not lower their guards immediately, but the feeling of victory was starting to become apparent. In the spot where the most significant global threat made its last stand, only a massive hole was left. There was no one happier than the descendants of the celestial tribe. After so many years, they succeeded once again, even if they had to pay a heavy price. Big Panda could no longer feel the breath of darkness permeating the air. Maybe they really did it. God Tree was already thinking of how to deal with the remaining beasts outside the dome. White Elephant must have pushed himself too hard after sustaining a lethal injury and finally collapsed. His comrades immediately checked on him, and it did not look good. Shi Yaoqing's been affiliated with the big guy since the war years ago, so she felt compelled to offer some essence of life for recovery. She had already told him to bring some just to be safe, but the elephant had been too stubborn in the past. But this time, he needs to lower his pride and stubbornness to accept the essence. Lowering their guards swiftly cost the aquatic dragon his head, decapitated by his sharp and dark energy. Shi Yaoqing looked at the blood spill. This could only mean one thing, right? One of the pillars of the sealing technique has been beheaded, and another was mortally injured on the ground. White Elephant's blood boiled, realizing that they had been deceived. Big Panda reacted quickly, readying himself for round 2, but he was not fast enough. The dark energy also bade him shredding through the fur and skin. It set the Big Panda into a rock formation, planting him deep within. God Tree extended his tendrils as the highest concentration of dark energy closed in from multiple angles. Looking at the skies, an omen of the apocalypse showed itself as space itself shattered, revealing a red hue. When the fragments of dimension finally gave in, a gigantic eye full of hatred revealed itself. He had been sealed in the same space for multiple lifetimes. That obsolete sealing method could not possibly get him dirty again, but he made sure of that. Angered by the assassination of their third, the remaining celestial beasts charged forward with a vengeance. The eye in the sky turned to them and summoned more tendrils through dark impact. These tendrils were fast and sturdy, nothing like the attacks that the celestial beings had ever encountered before. Big Panda, who was buried on the rocks, emerged with his giant apparition. That initial attack did a number on him. The bastard dared to deliberately gouge his eyes out, blinding him. Darkness had stopped talking trash after his reemergence. Spanning 300,000 evolution points, he purchased imitation, taking on the Big Panda's form and augmenting his frame with physical enhancement. With a superior body, one punch was all it took to dissipate the apparition. The punch was so heavy that the rebounded injury to Big Panda was severe. Throwing 150,000 evolution points into his system, Darkness purchased the Devourer skill. Taking on another fluid form, he picked up the nearly dying enemies from the floor to consume. The others couldn't react fast enough. Those that fell first got eaten mercilessly, seemingly hungry for more. Darkness moved fast and sharply, heading for the Flame Empress. God Tree managed to get to her side on time, punching the hungry darkness out of the way. He told her to retreat to the other side. He might be the only one capable of standing toe-to-toe against the enemy now. It's the battle of systems, for real. Shi Yaoqing tried to protest, but she knew that this fight was now out of her pay grade. Still, God Tree had to order her to retreat for her own sake. She had never seen the always composed master, this troubled by an opponent. Darkness Panda caught this interaction and became curious as to why the mutant tree was so protective of the girl. Irritated, God Tree closed the distance between them in a split second, shutting the enemy up. Surprisingly, his hard roots did not match his sharp claws. One swipe was enough to disintegrate one of God Tree's limbs, but that should not be a problem, as you could always spawn more. With more arms aiming to get him, Darkness lashed out with an octuple strike. It was super effective. Every root was cut precisely before they made contact. God Tree gnashed his teeth. This is not looking good at all. Compared to just a moment ago, Darkness feels like a whole new entity. This might be his real strength, and it's terrifying. Then came the invocation of gravity, catching God Tree off guard. He suddenly felt his body grow multiple times heavier, making it hard to move. He tried to resist as hard as he could, but Darkness was already coming in with a combo using Dragon King's breath. The only thing he could do to stop the attack was to cancel it with a fast-cast Pillar of Light. It was effective in stopping the breath, but Darkness just scoffed at its damage. It's a good thing God Tree's fast on his feet, thinking that light cannot be bound by gravity. Darkness finally opened his mouth again, praising Yu Ziyu for possessing human knowledge. So, in hopes of finally finishing the job, Darkness spent 2 million evolution points to call upon extinction. The sky opened up, and a gigantic meteor appeared through the skies. That meteor had the perfect size to shatter the entire battlefield. It's up to God Tree to make a choice, between escape or dying together with everyone else. God Tree does not like being looked down upon, so he used gigantification. Darkness thinks that this is futile resistance, but he wants to watch. Even with gigantification, the meteor was still superior in size. God Tree had to utilize the full power of 9 wood arboreal roots if he wanted to stay in one piece. The roots seemed sturdy enough to hold the hurling meteor and its unstoppable momentum. Buckling now would be tantamount to the destruction of the planet. It's in the name of the skill of extinction. This struggle went on for a while, and everyone's fate literally rested on God Tree's shoulders. He could not really throw the meteor back into the stratosphere, so he had to be creative. Piercing a massive rock with its roots, it was divided into 1,000 shards containing the power of destruction. Some unfortunate beasts nearby were caught by the blast. Even the stronger beasts like Kangaroo and Nine Tails were not exempt from the rain of death. Qinggang took on the role of protector, down in the vanguard with his earth defense. Little Panda was out in the open, trying to survive the meteor rain with his speed. He saw just how powerful each shard of extinction was in real time. The strong spirit power contained within each rock was palpable. Everyone was finally feeling the level of the battle between Darkness and God Tree. Extinction successfully destroyed the earth barrier, and the concealed spirit power inside was flowing out horrifyingly. Thunder Dragon watched as his fight was disturbed by the meteor rain. His dad, his greatest enemy, was slain by a stray piece of the meteor. This was possible thanks to Zi Leon's effort to cut the dragon's wings and legs, limiting mobility. With his last breath, the Australian dragon looked up and remarked that Thunder Dragon's spirit power felt exactly like his mother's. Before closing his eyes, the deadbeat father praised his son for growing up well.
We do not care.
Even though he came here to fight, the last moments of his parent broke the young dragon's heart. Back in the main fight, a massive crater has been dubbed by the extinction spell. Shi Yaoqing runs up, trying to find her master. Thankfully, there seem to be some signs of life hidden in the billowing dust. God Tree's body has been decimated to a pathetic degree. Half of his form was vaporized by the blast, not giving him any room to breathe and recover. Darkness charged in with Solar Flare, Crimson Lotus combined with a physique of flames. Purple flames surrounded his body, ramming into the already struggling God Tree. But he's not going down without a fight. Using his remaining hand, he converged Thunder. With some precisely calculated timing, he managed to stab Darkness in the eye with it. His mastery over this electrifying element was no joke. Give him some space, and he could blast a hole into anything. One attack was all it took for the tables to turn back in his favor once again. Darkness recovered and repositioned fast, unleashing a beastly roar. Even with a torn physical form, he's still determined to drive this world towards extinction, and he won't let anyone stop that. Darkness reckoned that this world would eventually head towards extinction. It was inevitable. He would kill every human, That was all he ever wanted. When asked if his hatred for humans stemmed from being sealed away, Darkness got weirdly quiet. He thought there was no point in confessing his reasons. He returned the question to Yu Ziyu and asked if he really trusted those filthy humans completely. The disintegrated body of the god tree did not answer. For the incarnation of evil, humans were an unforgivable lot. He deeply loathed their selfishness, arrogance, weakness, ignorance, foolish decisions, and everything they stood for. The sole reason for his existence was to kill them all and absorb their energy for himself. Everybody felt the dark energy permeate the atmosphere. Seth, Yule, the Arctic beasts, the bishop, transcendent Johnny Sins, the gold masks, and many more looked up to the skies. The moon was getting gradually bigger before their eyes, but it was not increasing in size. It was crashing down towards the planet instead. Do you guys remember what's on the moon? This was inconceivable. Humanity could never prepare a contingency plan for something that insane. Darkness was planning to destroy the planet, and even the most powerful political figures in the world couldn't do anything to stop it. God Tree growled at Darkness for being a petty bastard with a sob story. He did not deny those insults. He embraced them. According to his calculation, the moon would crash in 30 minutes. He was challenging Yu Ziyu to defeat him within half an hour. In a pinch, God Tree wasn't sure if he could pull this off. Suddenly, a beam of thunder exploded out towards Darkness. Thunder Dragon, fresh from mourning his deadbeat father, had come to join his master. He was young and dumb, and should not be poking his nose in a fight against someone like Darkness. The thunder beam was met with the wind element manipulation technique as wind blades cut through the distance. The seemingly unstoppable thunder energy was cut and dissipated, the wind blades continuing to slice the dragon in half. Then came the jaws, aiming to chomp down on the sliced lizard. It would have been a quick and tasty snack if it was not for the Flame Empress. Xiao Qing used her beast souls, which were bound by her earrings, to drive Darkness away from the Thunder Dragon. Infuriated, Darkness retaliated by melding a nasty ball of devastation. Once again, the careless Misty Mountain troops were bailed out by the big boss. Taking on a form made of lava and magma, God Tree went to a brawl. He actually shattered his heart to obtain more spirit power by force. Darkness laughed, admiring his enemy's stubborn persistence. A life and death battle was the best kind of battle, after all. Yu Ziyu grabbed his subordinates out of the way and tossed them inside the dimension of life to recover. Xiao Qing did not want to, but she had no choice in the matter. Inside the dimension, roots made of life essence started extending outward. They eventually connected themselves to Thunder Dragon's grievous injuries. There was also the earliest citizen of the dimension of life, the Mermaid Queen, Elsa, seeing the portal open and two exasperated figures thrown in. Elsa taunted Xiao Qing about what was happening outside. She could feel the power inside the dimension of life getting thinner by the second. And that could only mean one thing. Outside, Yu Ziyu was fighting his heart out to prevent the decimation of the planet. Darkness spent a hefty amount of evolution points to ravage the surroundings with a flame hurricane. In response to the dark flame, God Tree summoned an ice age that sculpted cold spikes on the field. Upon reaching the enemy's body, a sharp temperature drop stopped Darkness in his tracks. Even with limited mobility, he could just use Dark Impact to thaw himself out of the icy trouble. It wasn't only a defensive maneuver, as the dark energy pierced through God Tree's magma body. He quickly plugged up the new holes in his body with superior regeneration. Regaining momentum, Darkness beckoned the tree world advent. It was a big technique that needed a bit of setup that he could not get to before seeing God Tree jump in, with a big-ass lava hand made for crushing. That comedically massive fist was highly effective. Darkness nearly got crushed under its weight, but God Tree was not done yet. If he was going for a win, he'd have to go all in. With a desperate roar, God Tree expanded his scorching body fast and wide. Darkness, in its weakest form, knew that this was bad. The scorching tendrils of his extended body were nimble, strong, and almost impossible to dodge. This resulted in Darkness being torn to shreds. What remained of his tiny body coughed and cursed God Tree's endless tricks. When a pillar of light blasted from the sky, it locked Darkness in position. This opened up an easy grab on the little one-eyed form. Once grasped tightly, God Tree proceeded to use Thunder Control at point-blank range. Combining a fire form and Thunder Control raised the heat to an unbelievable degree. The intensity was hot enough to melt what remained of Darkness. Finally, everyone could see a wall of fire extending to the clouds. All beasts from all sides tried their hardest to find cover, to avoid becoming collateral damage. Alas, Darkness was a near immortal figure, that could survive that hellish sequence of attacks and start regenerating. If things kept going like this, Uktrahir would be depleted of spirit power first, as darkness continuously regenerated using evolution points. This was the first time darkness had been forced into such a perilous situation. But, as he said, he intended to show everyone what despair truly was. Those beasts that Uktrahir caringly nurtured were powerful, and from now on, darkness would claim them for his own. With that cryptic announcement, multiple dark system prompts appeared in front of him. Uktrahir was puzzled and worried. This bastard just kept pulling OP powers from left and right. This time, it was very straightforward. Sparky, who was still busy mowing down tons of Australian beasts, paused for a second. He felt something odd going on inside his mind. His consciousness was being hijacked by something invisible. The same thing was happening to the other Misty Mountain beasts. They were behaving erratically, while their eyes turned completely black. No one was spared. Even the most powerful generals struggled to fight for their sanity. The sole exception to the manipulation might just be Ninetales, the strongest of them all. Kangaroo, who was bloodied and beaten, could already feel the taste of impending doom against the fox. Just as she was about to finish the job, the plague that infected her comrades managed to get its dirty, grubby hands on her brain too. She pumped up the temperature to the limit, burning everything in the vicinity, trying to burn the spell taking over. But it was too late. Darkness had spent 50 million evolution points for the assimilation technique. It was one of his most expensive and powerful skills. Within a limited radius, the loyal soldiers of Uktrahir lost control and rationality. Uktrahir didn't know what was happening yet, but he would find out soon. The first one to enter the fight made Uktrahir turn around. It was his premier assassin, his conqueror's blade, Sparky, the golden mutant ant. Still unaware of the mind plague, his guard was down. As Sparky took a quick first step to explode at speed, Sparky's unbelievably sharp blade, which had served as master, turned on the man he swore allegiance to. The cool and unperturbed fighter was gone. In his place was a bumbling and aggressive bug hungry for blood. Darkness playfully explained that assimilation is used to control the thoughts of other creatures, so all of the Misty Mountain subordinates were now his puppets. This was a lot worse than Uktrahir expected. If his precious weapons turned on him, the world might not stand a chance. Suddenly, a sneaky inferno blast spun in the air, aiming for him. It was promptly blocked by an earth element wall. It did not cause any harm, but upon sensing, Uktrahir identified the owner of those fearsome flames. The attack came straight from his most trusted general, one of his first allies, the powerful Ninetales. Darkness snickered at the sight of comrades attacking each other, but the show was just beginning.
You can't keep getting away with it!
These puppets were aggressive, as if they were hungry for Uktrahir's blood. Ninetales charged in with the aim to kill the most important figure in her life. Another Inferno Blast came out of her maw. Working off of that ranged attack, Sparky slashed in with a sextuple strike. Two powerful attacks came from the two he trusted most. Uktrahir was not expecting to deal with something this messed up. To add to the absurdity, Qinggong, the man who denounced his humanity to serve Uktrahir with complete loyalty, used earth pillars to push him off balance. With him was the ferocious Tiger tribe, just waiting for the turn to come up. White Tiger, Xiaolan, and Qinggong, some of his most trusted and cheerful aides, were coming at him with full force from the back, while Lung Feng and Thorn took the other angle. They executed a perfectly timed joint attack to peel through the hard tree skin of their boss. Darkness goaded Yu Ziyu to just kill them all, so he wouldn't have to deal with the annoying attacks. But that was the last thing Yu Ziyu would want to do, so he decided to use the majority of his remaining spirit power to activate the Tree World Advent, wrapping his mind-controlled subjects with his roots and holding them at a distance. The only way out of this tricky situation was to deal with Darkness himself. That was the ideal way to free his comrades, so he tried another multiple-pronged attack with 9 wood arboreal roots. Darkness smiled menacingly as he called on Little Panda to act as a meat shield against the lethal attack. Uktrahir tried to talk to Little Panda, but the mind manipulation was too intense. That split second of hesitation also opened him up for an attack that nearly shattered his whole head. Darkness laughed mockingly at him for falling for such a cheap trick. If he couldn't even stomach the collateral damage, he'd have no chance of winning. He continued taunting Yu Ziyu about the feeling of betrayal he must be experiencing. What he was feeling now, Darkness himself had already been through long ago. Deciding to finally join the fight himself, Darkness spent 2 million evolution points to swing the blade of destruction. The purple light of death swiftly came into view. Uktrahir, trapped in his position and distracted by his manipulated allies, took the attack as a direct hit. He could only bet on his defensive chances, using crystallization and reinforcement. The blast sent his body flying like a rag doll. As the smoke billowed, darkness carefully extended his senses on the field. You could still see the Misty Mountain beasts sealed in their own little bubbles, which meant Godtree still had some spare energy to protect his crew at this point. The only thing that remained of his body was his cracked core and the little bit of bark connected to it. His spirit power was practically depleted, and the previous form had taken a toll on his body. In his last act as leader, he thought of at least sending everyone to his dimension. Darkness extended his grotesque limb to the defenseless god. He argued that even if Yu Ziyu protected his precious allies now, they'd just die when he died. This was the game they both decided to play, and Darkness never viewed him as a serious opponent. His onslaught was not something that anyone could stop, just because they wanted to. Just like how day and night exists as long as the planet rotates, Darkness, as an entity, is inevitable. With the moon's crash getting closer by the second, Darkness made Yu Ziyu watch as the end drew near. His advice for the poor tree was to carry his regrets and unwillingness as he returned to nothingness. For the first time ever, Yu Ziyu seriously contemplated his death. If he died, everyone would go down with him. That's not a fun thought to have while the purple beam of devastation heads for your severed and conscious head. By some miracle, an unfamiliar energy signature interrupted and rammed itself against Darkness. It messed up the aim and severed the hand holding Godtree's head instead. Before the head could hit the ground helplessly, it was caught by someone's beak. It was the White Crane, coming in clutch as usual. The hero no one expected, and no one deserved.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Darkness was peeved that he had let one of these pathetic beasts escape his assimilation net. So he left it to the other flying beasts to interrupt the bold rescue mission. Australian bats flew in, using their sonic attacks to try and make the crane drop Godtree's head. But the bird was crafty, strong, and swift. Some small-time bats were basically traffic cones for him. But facing off against Demon Cow was a different story. This monster ranked among the strongest in Misty Mountains. After all, right now, that same beast just clobbered the crane's face with a battle axe, knocking Godtree's head loose. The White Crane shot down like a meteor, so close yet so far. Down below, the number of real threats was staggering. The cream of the crop was waiting. Even with the injuries from plummeting to the ground, White Crane still stood his ground, trying to protect his boss at all costs, even if that meant facing off against the most powerful beasts in the world in futility. Godtree tried to let White Crane run quickly, as they'd just get crushed together at this point. But the brave bird proudly proclaimed that he would never run away, even while throwing up blood. Darkness watched with keen interest from a distance. White Crane added that he was already prepared to die when he came to this battlefield. If their existence became obstacles for Godtree, then he trusted that Godtree would still find a way to make it work like he always did. But he did not come here to be a burden. He came here to win, no matter the cost. It took an impassioned speech from an unexpected ally to wake Yu Ziyu up to the fact that there might yet be hope for them. Darkness did not like that sliver of hope blooming. He hated optimists the most. So, to mess with Godtree, he targeted White Crane with a torturous grasp. Calling the other Misty Mountain beasts, he prepared one more move to bury all hope once and for all, something called fusion. Darkness slowly absorbed White Crane into his amorphous body while the bird yelled out to his master for help. Godtree wanted so badly to do something about it, but in his current state, he couldn't. The incarnation of evil was done with all the interruptions. It was his time to have some fun, taking all of Godtree's generals. Each one was submerged into the primordial body. Even the stronger Australian beasts were not spared. Kangaroo and his crew were swept along the way. And so, the absorption began. Friend or foe, Darkness did not differentiate between anyone. In the seas, those with sharper senses could feel the spirit powers rampaging on the land, wholly and slowly disappearing. All they could see was a tall curtain of darkness and nothing else. They did not know that thousands upon thousands of mind-controlled beasts were being fed to an ultimate technique. Darkness laughed maniacally at the thought of having every creature in the vicinity become a part of him eventually. The thick stream of beast essences traveled to a single point, being absorbed in the technique's origin. Godtree watched helplessly, as his comrades and enemies alike were treated like animal feed. This fusion process gave birth to a grotesque amalgamation of every monster one could imagine. Yu Ziyu had never seen anything like it before. Darkness bragged about absorbing everything down to the last beast, and feeling the brimming power within him. He moved his hundreds of limbs and hooves, intending to crush his biggest opposition under his foot. God Tree did not even have the mobility to get out of the way, so his core suffered under the weight of 1,000 beasts. With the moon's imminent landing, the planet's magnetic field was going haywire, and its remaining lifespan was now only 20 minutes. Pushing himself to the limit and squeezing every last bit of strength he still had, God Tree managed to summon his roots with painful overexertion. Just as it was starting to look like he still had something left in him, darkness landed a punch that cracked his core in half. This might be it. This might be where our story ends. Taking the ground-down core of his greatest enemy, Darkness laughed like a madman as he likened God Tree to nothing more than an ant. Applying a little bit of pressure, he turned up the crushing pain, bit by bit. God Tree tried his hardest to struggle with his pathetically thin roots, and Darkness just ridiculed his efforts. This futile struggle to cling to non-existent hope is an impasse possessed by most creatures. But the facts will never change, and death will always be the final end, no matter what form it takes. Unleashing one more overkill beam to erase God Tree from existence completely, Darkness made it look like a hopeless ordeal. As the death beam got closer, he cursed his fate and the cruelty of Darkness. The beam moved and spread out, distributing incessant destruction all over the war zone. Then suddenly, time stood still. Everything paused. God Tree opened his eyes and looked around. He was supposed to die, right? But the sensation felt a lot like that time when Divine Flower manipulated time. But this time, it was not just a few seconds pause. This time, the entire space and time continuum had frozen. Out of nowhere, a system prompt appeared before his eyes. With a solemn robotic voice, it referred to him by his human name, Yu Ziyu. The system asked if he wanted to win. Caught off guard, he did not know how to respond right away, so he asked if there was still a chance to turn this miserable position around. The system just asked him to follow. 1 second, he was trapped between Darkness's fingers. The next, he was on top of a cliff in an unknown location. This was a view from 129,600 years ago, the epoch year when history had broken off, and the year Darkness was born.
You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
It was kind of crazy to comprehend. But could this mean that he actually time traveled? But the system corrected him, saying this was just a holographic memory. Darkness was born on a highly civilized planet, facing destruction due to certain reasons. He managed to escape before the end of civilization, and touched down on Earth during the Cretaceous period. The planet where his race previously prospered is currently known as Mars. The system urged God Tree to keep an open mind, as this might sound inconceivable. After countless years, Darkness woke up and met a human girl. After saving the girl, Darkness granted her a gift. She became the first human in history to possess a system. During that time, another significant event happened as well. The first spirit tide began to emerge. So, it would be fair to say that the system's activation triggered the spirit tide itself. The same thing happened the moment Yu Ziyu was reborn as the Divine Tree. The circumstances of their birth are the same. After the first spirit tide was triggered, the world entered an era of cultivation and magic. That girl gifted with the first system became an absolute powerhouse. During that time, Darkness kept his distance from civilization. But as time passed, his growth became too rapid, and his body started emitting a poisonous miasma. Everywhere he went, death followed, with all kinds of creatures turning into evolution points, making him more powerful. There was no way to suppress this miasma, as all living creatures emit an unchangeable scent. The girl understood this as well. She knew that Darkness could wipe out every living creature in the future. So she betrayed him. It sparked a battle that gathered the most powerful humans on the planet. The intensity and scale of the fight were so fierce that you could smell the stench of blood from 10 miles away. The war lasted for a month, leaving the girl and Darkness as the only survivors. Darkness pleaded with Ling Ling to stop this struggle. But even with a bloodied body and a broken weapon, she stood firm. With reluctant tears, she steeled her resolve for a kill or be killed situation. The survival of mankind hinged on killing a good friend from her past. Both parties fought with grief. Since humans still exist today, that must mean they won, right? They only won because Darkness decided to give up resisting and let Ling Ling live. That means humanity had never truly managed to defeat Darkness. He was the one who jumped into the seal to end it all. The two had a mutual understanding of what had to be done. Little Black cried as he chose the path to end everything, even though he was scared of being trapped alone, separated from his only friend. But the fact that she was being harmed by his mere existence was a worse feeling. If he continued to live, there would come a time when Ling Ling would die because of him. He couldn't let such a cruel thing happen, so he sealed himself into nothingness. He reckoned that this would provide the best ending for both of them. With the last bit of evolution points he had, he helped Ling Ling recover from the month-long war. With tears in her eyes, she watched as her friend vanished. All he asked of her was to live for a really long time, a request that would not be fulfilled a few seconds after it was spoken, as a blade stabbed Ling Ling through the chest.
Emotional, damn it!
Little Black paused, not believing what he had just seen. His friend's life force slowly drained away with every cough of blood. A man had sneaked behind the boulders and delivered a fatal strike to her heart. He had been lusting over Ling Ling's system and the continuation of the spirit power era. Darkness tried to intervene, but it was too late. Another man emerged from hiding to get in some slashes and share the glory. They offered a fake apology, reasoning that they were just doing this for the sake of their sex. They wanted to sacrifice Ling Ling for their own interests. Darkness tried desperately to escape the portal he had willingly walked into, but he could not get out. He wanted so badly to kill those greedy bastards. The humans that actually dismembered the person Darkness loved the most. They divided Ling Ling's body among different sects, trying to stop the dissipation of spirit power from the world. Yu Ziyu could finally understand why Darkness loathed humanity. Ultimately, the spirit power era still came to a close. It was just the laws of nature. As for the Celestial Tribe, they were beasts nurtured by Ling Ling before, tasked with repairing the seal every 3,000 years. Yu Ziyu finally understood the history of Darkness. But the way to victory was still unclear. The system explained that as long as no creatures died, Darkness wouldn't be able to obtain evolution points. That sounded easier said than done, especially in the middle of a worldwide war. The system had a way to make it happen, but Yu Ziyu would have to pay the price. Yu Ziyu would have to take over as the new Darkness, replacing the current one to maintain the balance. He asked if this was the system's plan from day one. It admitted to doing exactly that, because it had seen the future where Yu Ziyu won. So he could just go ahead and take the new ability bestowed upon him by the seemingly omnipotent system. Thick and dark energy permeated Yu Ziyu's core. The system asked him what his plan of action was from this point on. He answered that the first part was to defeat Darkness, then he would save him. Before heading back out, Yu Ziyu finally asked the big question of who was behind the system. The text prompt dissipated into green smoke and eventually took the form of a woman. Not just any woman, but the same one that Yu Ziyu saw in the vision. The system itself was Kastree's first system holder, Ling Ling. This should clarify everything that's happened up until now. Yu Ziyu was shocked, but the reveal did clear up a lot of questions in his mind. He vowed to resolve this resentment that had lasted for far too long once he got back out there. Meanwhile, the dimension of life was quiet and tense. Shi Yao Qing kept on trying to shatter the dimension walls, to the point of bleeding fists to no avail. Elsa kept on telling her to stop struggling, as God Tree had probably lost already. This dimension would start to shrink, and they'd get crushed to death. Shi Yao Qing could not care less about dying. She was just concerned about her master. Then, the entire field lit up with a golden light full of vitality. Elsa and Shi Yao Qing were taken aback and confused as to what was happening. They both felt the dimension gushing with power once again, which presented a surprising possibility. Time had returned to its original flow, and God Tree's core faced the death beam. But Darkness felt a different vibe instead of a quick death. He watched as the core sprouted a whole gigantic body made up of sturdy material. He could not believe his eyes. This battle was just one surprise after another. God Tree's new body proliferated all over the place, establishing a foothold in the blink of an eye. The troops at sea could feel the alarming presence on the mainland. Still, they couldn't possibly comprehend how an incomparably enormous spirit power was rising so fast. Even the sea beasts that were trashing human ships seemed fearful of it. They could only imagine how intense that mainland battle must be. With all his regenerated body parts in place, a hint of void power traveled along God Tree's new frame. Not going to lie, this is his cleanest form by far. What do you guys think? Thanks to the system's gift, he had obtained a stronger and more resilient body than he had before. Darkness refused to believe that something like this could happen by Yu Ziyu's hands alone. For the sake of defeating the misunderstood incarnation of evil, he had returned from hell. God Tree and his new combat void mecha form faced the enemy bravely. He called Darkness by his original name, Little Blackie. Hearing that old pet name visibly disturbed the monster. Desperate to know how in the world Yu Ziyu would know that name, he wanted to get some answers. God Tree played it cool and asserted that there were many things that Darkness wasn't aware of. Being treated like the ignorant party for once, Darkness did not like being left in the dark. He tried to attack with his tendrils, but God Tree didn't even bother blocking or dodging. The Absolute Giga Chad just stood up and unleashed a ranged attack of his own. This simple attack was much more potent than the ones he had done before. It made darkness spew blood in one strike. Not letting the pressure plummet, Godtree charged forward. He was locked in to never allow darkness's cruel wish to come true, so he shot out a dark field of enigmatic energy that spread in a circle. This dark dome expanded ceaselessly until it finally covered the entire war zone. This technique seemed familiar to darkness. It was called space-time suspension, the ability to stop time without the use of any spirit power. Darkness argued that he was just delaying the inevitable at this point. Both the time suspended by the cosmos, Darkness could say goodbye to getting new evolution points to spend on skills. But the big bad boss was confident that this would hardly matter with how many beasts he had absorbed. He opened his disgusting mouth, and a screeching echo wave decimated everything in its path. Godtree used crystallization, making his body nearly indestructible. Without minding the echo wave, he closed the gap and socked Darkness in the mouth using his thunder-controlling fist. Darkness coughed up blood from his multiple orifices. To combat the overwhelming physical strength, he splurged out with flames, petrification, and a thunder dive. The combination of three deadly techniques rolled into one fearsome charge was a sight to behold. But much to his surprise, Godtree casually caught his body in mid-air with bare hands. Then he started feeling the essence of wind coalescing in those slender hands. At point-blank range, it would be impossible to dodge the incoming attack. Godtree sliced down using a flying leaf blade, cleanly cutting the monster's disgusting form in half. He wasn't satisfied with just cleaving the entire field. Darkness was resilient, though. Taking advantage of the cover, he used a heavenly eye ray. With reflexes that were out of this world, Godtree swatted the attack away with his roots. Expanding in size, Darkness charged in with unparalleled persistence, dwarfing Godtree's void form. Luckily, he was quick to bust out one of his most flexible abilities, Ice Age. Summoning icicle structures from hell, they stabbed and shredded the overinflated body like paper. Darkness could feel that the ice was a lot harder than the Ice Age before. Spending 100,000 evolution points, his vile body was glued back together with superior regeneration. He had 2.3 million points remaining, but Godtree was only getting started with his retaliation. Next came the light pillar that was multiple times stronger than the ones that could only inflict some burn damage earlier. This time, the scorching light was actively disintegrating Darkness's physical form to the smallest component. In response, he dipped down to 1.9 million points to surround himself with a solar flare Crimson Lotus and a thunderous shockwave. With this combo, he intended to turn Godtree and this hateful planet into a hornet's nest. To do that, you have to land an attack, and that's impossible if your eyes are being squeezed like balloons. One hand holding the monster in place, Yu Ziyu readied his other for a devastating attack. He would never let such wanton levels of destruction happen on his watch. So he blasted Darkness at melee range, turning a pile of absorbed beasts into smoke. You got to give it to Darkness. If there is one thing he excels at, it would be resilience. No one could take strong hits better than this guy, but the sudden and drastic increase in Godtree's power was scaring him. You could only wonder what happened to this guy in a split second before his supposed death. With his form resembling melted ice cream, Darkness still had the gall to boast that he was unbeatable as he tried to purchase the Nullify skill. Much to his surprise, the system blocked him from using Nullify. This had never happened before. He thought that having enough points would give him any ability in the world. But it looks like nullifying the seal of time and space was just too big of a job, even for his purchaser system. That few seconds of surprise blunder left him open for another brutal punch to the jaw. Tumbling down on his back, he resembled a rotten potato, struggling to get back up. He couldn't fathom why this was happening to him. He was supposed to be unbeatable. Before thinking those thoughts, he needed to get back into a healthy state first, so he purchased the superior regeneration skill. Just like earlier, the system gave him an error message. This time, he really started to panic. He tried purchasing healing, power of vitality, regeneration, and every kind of recovery ability, but was met with persistent system errors. Such a thing had never happened before, so where did he go wrong? He turned to Godtree for answers. That guy must have done something to him and his system. But Godtree just responded by opening the mouths of his void roots to prepare an all-out attack. He wouldn't allow Darkness to run rampant anymore. Things must end now. Although he understood why the monster hated humans, involving every living creature in his planned extinction was crossing the line. The multiple heads of his void roots beamed out their destructive attacks in a concert of devastation. Once the immobile darkness was hit, his flesh disintegrated in a brilliant light. This beam slowly burned through the monster, while dragging him through the ground mercilessly. With the last few specks of energy he had, Darkness warned God Tree that humans would also be his eventual downfall in the future. The sheer hate he had for those bastards was giving Darkness a second wind to push back. The moon had gotten so low that it was starting to touch the space-time suspension dome. If this goes on, Darkness will recover and another strung-out battle will take place. God Tree couldn't afford to risk that, so he might as well pour as much power as he could to thoroughly delete the miserable bastard. Darkness kept on trying to purchase any skill, and the system finally revealed what was happening. He had been invaded by a virus.
You're a victim!
By the looks of it, the virus might have something to do with the celestial beasts that he tried to absorb. Darkness writhed in pain as his body literally cooked. God Tree was doing his best, but he did not expect the resilient body to start dissolving from his attacks. For some clarification, the incarnation of White Elephant explained that this was because of the system virus, an ability implanted with celestial beasts to deal with the ultimate enemy. After being passed down through many generations, it is finally proving its usefulness today. Darkness turned into dark fumes, dissipating in the air. With him being weakened, it gave way for the earlier victims to show themselves again. The Australith King of Australia had broken free of the possession with his mangled body. Having a mutual understanding of their current situation, the former rival of the mutant tree yelled at him to finish the job. The apparition of Nine Tails also showed itself to provide some support. Sparky's incarnation pushed his master, now that they were so close to winning. Every beast general manifested their support to their master. Everyone was pouring their wills and hearts, so the boss must naturally deliver. Darkness was being forced into a tight spot, but he refused to accept this. He tried to remind them that with his death comes the dissipation of spirit power in the world, but that was not going to be a problem anymore. Seeing the confused Darkness, God Tree explained that he would slot into the role of Darkness while maintaining his sense of self. To do that, he would put his foot down, open up his body, and unleash the single most dense and terrifying quantity of energy known to man. Darkness tried to order Australith to release him, but even the king of Australian beasts would gladly sacrifice himself just so Darkness could not reign. The beams of light continued to pour out, continuing the erasure of the incarnation of evil. Darkness was deleted down to the cellular level, leaving only a trail of essence. While he was being deconstructed, Little Blackie saw a glimpse of a familiar figure, the person that he loved the most. Ling Ling did not avert her eyes, but profound sadness could be felt within her gaze. In his final moments, Darkness felt his longing for his friend. He just missed her so much. In death, he never wanted to be separated from her again. The big bad boss had been erased from the physical plane, and the only thing left to deal with was the descending moon. From Darkness's resting site came a peculiar ornament floating in the air. It was a red nucleus surrounded by dark miasma. Ling Ling, the system, identified it as the core of Darkness and tasked God Tree to swallow that thing. He grabbed it out of the air, feeling the weight it represented in his palms. After swallowing this, he asked if dead creatures would become his evolution points. But that's not how it works. It would just replace Ling Ling and keep the spirit power in the world intact. Curious and excited, he asked if he would get the purchaser system with it. Unfortunately, his body was programmed differently, so he would retain the same type of system as usual. Ling Ling mentioned that she would disappear once everything was said and done. Just like when a human reaches the end of their lifespan, she would go where she was supposed to go a long time ago. With the world's current situation, this was already the best case scenario for everyone involved. Up till the end, she was very happy to be able to fight alongside someone like Yu Ziyu. So, for one final moment, she would like to trouble him for one last send-off. He quietly complied and thanked Ling Ling for all the years that they had been fighting and growing together. With a final goodbye, she burst into a blinding ray of light, scattering into the ether. The space-time suspension dome started cracking open. Once shattered completely, complete radiance filled the bloody war zone. As spirits, Little Blackie and his most beloved human could finally reunite in their purest and most innocent form. They both swore that they wouldn't be separated again. Despite all the baggage between them, the love was still there. Ling Ling smiled and hugged the strange creature she had met when she was just a little girl. In a sense, they both got their happy ending in the end. It's enough to make a grown man cry. After Darkness dissipated into the ether, the contents of his grotesque body scattered all over the place. Golden spheres holding the beasts he manipulated and absorbed flew everywhere. They woke up in a daze, not having a grasp of what was happening. As soon as Big Panda popped out of his sphere, he immediately started looking to kill darkness. Looking around, he saw his little brother instead. He ran and put his little bro in a headlock, assuming that his poor bro was being mind-controlled. The Australian beast force also touched down, confused at the sight of bright blue sky. From the seas, you could watch as the moon naturally returned to its original position without any trouble. Sif could feel the breath of darkness disappearing in real time. That must mean the mutant tree finally won. Back to his gold and black natural form, Yu Ziyu looked fresh, as if he did not just go through destruction and restoration over and over again in the span of a single war. All of his comrades were safe and sound, albeit a little shaken and confused. Shi Yaoqing stepped forward, not knowing what to say to her master. Meanwhile, the Sea Kings, who were expecting a Grand Slam victory, could not fathom that their all-powerful King of Darkness lost. The Crowd King in particular started thrashing around wildly, protesting the result of the war. That earned him a critical punch to the carapace courtesy of Golden Jesus. The war was over, but the Straddlers would have to learn to accept defeat with grace. Yule also helped with the cleanup, using his manually controlled nuclear weapons. He was quick to act and take advantage of the massive swing and momentum they had just got. This led to the wiser Sea Kings issuing the order for retreat. They were in a bad spot, and the morale of the enemies was sky high. Just like that, the dominating force on water ran with their tails stuck between their legs. The human experts and fleets who were just clinging to dear life a few minutes ago couldn't believe the sight of sea beasts retreating to the depths. Unfortunately, the intense naval battles led to some severe damage on the friendly side, too. Orca had sustained some serious injuries, but his biggest gripe was the wiping out of his whole Orca tribe. The five-headed snake didn't even know how to comfort his friend. With a sense of peace and security, they turned their attention to the main land, where a mysterious light was emanating. It was coming from Godtree's golden body. He was finally notified of the successful system exchange. On top of his existing superior power, a hint of a regal shade could be felt. After the war against darkness, the entire world entered a temporary period of peace. The Australists ransacking different countries retreated to Australia, too. Humanity was so close to drowning in despair, but finally saw a ray of hope. The total death toll came up to a staggering 5 million.
That's what the kids call epic fail.
Out of the 14 sovereign states in Australia, only 7 remained. All countries that sent their forces to war have also issued their withdrawal. That included the beasts from different factions like Seth and the others. 5 days later, the recovery and reclamation process proceeded smoothly. The lazy bald head even had the time to lounge around and sleep on his master's branches now. The rest of the Misty Mountain beasts were pretty much back to their usual routine and eccentricities. Shi Yaoqing brought up the question of their following plans now that darkness was no more. She asked if they would continue staying in Australia. Godtree confirmed that they would be doing just that for a while. Since they had come all the way to this place already, they might as well conquer the land and subdue the leaderless beasts. Shi Yaoqing would start moving humans away first, as she had to hurry back and deal with the aftermath of the war in her own corner of the world. Before she bounced out, Godtree handed her a few bottles of life essence to reward her subordinates for a job well done. White Elephant and the rest of the Celestial tribe also arrived to seek an audience with Godtree. Godtree's open-air Australian throne had been landscaped and manipulated according to his whims. At his foot were the warriors, who had contributed significantly to the victory 5 days ago. The White Elephant explained that they were there to bid farewell to the divine tree, as a form of respect. They were already leaving amidst the recovery, but Godtree urged them to stay a bit longer. However, they expressed their gratitude for helping save the planet. He was the one who formally ended the dispute that had stretched for tens of thousands of years after all. Starting today, the Celestial tribe's descendants would no longer bear the heavy burden of a cruel destiny. When asked about their plans, Yu Ziyu suggested that they stay with his group at Misty Mountain. The Celestials thanked him for the offer, but they needed to return to Celestial Mountain, their home. When needed, they would answer the call from their benefactor. That could work, too. You can't go wrong with having Celestial allies. With a final respectful farewell, they flew back home, darting through the skies. It was a pity that Godtree couldn't rope them in as formal members, but at least they were open to collaboration. White Elephant, who was more accustomed to the human world, would join Shi Yaoqing for a little while, returning to her nation. Godtree watched as these beasts took to the air and felt jealous that he still couldn't do that effortlessly. The Hua Shia Federation was still dealing with the unexpected win against the apocalyptic threat of the incarnation of evil. They knew, as well as everyone else, that there would no longer be any creature or group on this planet that could stand against someone as powerful as that tree. Humanity should count its lucky stars that this deity didn't have any intentions of fighting against humans again. For now, at least, the Federation head could only silently hope that it stayed that way in the future as well. The Freedom Federation took the successful war quite differently. Currently, they have deployed some troops for rescue operations in Australia. Council members of the United Nations have drawn up the playbook for the rescue operations. But their paranoid leader wanted to send their armies over to defend. He was worried that the beasts in Australia would be a threat to the citizens. His staffer heavily opposed his orders, as the coalition of nations wouldn't like things that might lead to unnecessary troubles. But the blonde bastard didn't care about that. He thought every country was prioritizing rebuilding after the Australith rampage, so it was the best time for them to take action. He wanted combat divisions and armored cavalry knocking on other nations' doors, in the name of protecting world peace. Back in the war zone turned base camp, Godtree was messing around in his dimension of life. It had already been filled with pearls produced by the Mermaid Queen. With an accepting smile on her face, she cheekily teased Godtree that she did not expect him to win. But at the end of the day, he did win, and it was a very painful victory. Elsa insisted that her king only wanted to be free and live. From the standpoint of Darkness's followers, that line of thinking made sense. While the root constriction loosened, Elsa noticed that Godtree was now emitting the spirit power of her king. Stop. She bent the knee and requested to be allowed to serve him from now on. He paused for a second, assessing the sincerity within her words, and accepted the request. Back in the real world, Ninetails came up to her master with a few guests that he had explicitly asked for. These were some of the most powerful and fearsome beasts in Australia's lineup. They were quite a headache as enemies in war. The behemoth and the crimson lotus platypus, in particular, were worth nurturing for their potential. Other than them, there were also a few tribes that were willing to swear their allegiance to the new god. Scanning past the other beasts, Godtree couldn't find the kangaroo or the cat that wore the cloak. Ninetails answered that she made the call to release them. Right now, those two were hiding behind some quarries, trying their best to recuperate from their serious injuries. Little Panda had been deployed to track them down for a specific reason. Of course, they thought that he had come to finish the job, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. But Little Panda hurriedly insisted that he just track them down to pass a message. He also brought a vial of life essence enough for two. Ninetails herself sent this bottle. She also wanted to let them know that they were lucky to be alive, so they should go and find a place to continue their lives and not think of pointless revenge. Little Panda advised them not to waste their hard-won lives. The cat was so triggered by the arrogance of that sentiment that her cloak fell off. Seeing her face, Little Panda was smitten, but he still only had eyes for his dear Xiao Ai. Kangaroo chose to be the bigger man and admitted that they had lost. As a reply, he wanted Little Panda to relay to Ninetails that he would accept this metaphorical death and would never disturb her again. Just like that, the Darkness arc had concluded. Thanks for watching.